So good evening, brothers and sisters. Thank you for having me in this such an intimate and warm and cozy environment. It is a joy to come from all the way from Olcott to visit this lodge. I don't know how old it is, but it feels that a lot of people have come by and left a little piece of their hearts in this home. I can call it home. And so it is a privilege to be here with you tonight. Thank you for having me. Say your name. My name is Danelys Valcarel, and I do work at Olcott, although very part-time right now. A little bit in the library for the education department and information department, and so a little bit of facilitating groups, a little bit of helping wherever I can fit, and so I fill in the blank as they need me, as well as working full-time as a Waldorf teacher and a friend and a daughter and all the rest of it that keeps my life busy. And tonight I would like to share a little bit of this subject that is rather broad, but yet very compact in these statements that we have chosen as the motto for the Theosophical Society. I had given a lecture months ago in fall, and it is recorded. It is there on the internet if anyone would like to see a different angle of this topic. There are some things that I will skip count because there's just so much time we have here tonight. And but just a brief introduction to the topic. There is no religion higher than truth has attracted countless earnest seekers to the study of the enlightenment doctrines of the worldwide movement of the Theosophical movement since its founding in 1875. And this presentation will explore some of the core universal values found in these perennial teachings and their spiritual applications, which can lead to the attainment of self-knowledge and the realization of truth in every moment of our daily living. So when I gave this lecture, it was around the anniversary of the Theosophical Society's foundings, and this year happens to be the 143 anniversary. So we've gone a long way, and Theosophy keeps rolling. So once again, thank you for the opportunity and celebrating once again. I think we celebrate it every day. It's been such an extraordinary effort to bring this forth into the world. So I would like to have a few moments of silence, and I would like to share a couple of invocations that I usually do in these moments of celebration within our theosophical gatherings and groups. There is a blessedness and a power beyond oneself, which comes to the aid of those who are prepared to receive. Let us turn to those great sources from whom strength and inspiration flow unfailingly. To all who, forgetful of self, are intent to learn and to share without reservation. May those who are the embodiment of love immortal bless with their help and guidance this society, founded to be a channel for their work. May they inspire it with their wisdom, strengthen it with their power, and energize it with their activity. So I wonder how many of you, those who are not familiar with the history behind this motto, have been as puzzled and enchanted with it as much as I have throughout all these years. There is a little bit of history here and there, but not much has been written widely about it. And I would like to share a few bits of history tonight with those who haven't heard yet that part of, those little jewels of history that the Theosophical movement has. I think this movement is fascinating not only because of the teachings, but because of the rich history that is behind the scenes. There is so much that happened that makes it, such an important contribution, I would say, to the unfoldment of consciousness. the human struggle as well as the human discovery and realization. So the Theosophical Society, as we were talking about, it was founded in November 17th, 1875. That is not news, old news for everyone now, in New York. And it was founded by Russian noblewoman Helena Petrovna Blavatsky and Colonel Henry S. Olcott, who was an American, and also helped by the Irish-American attorney William Quan Judge and a number of other silent workers that trusted and believed in the philosophy set forth by Madame Blavatsky. And so in 1979, the principal founders, Madame Blavatsky and Olcott, moved to India. And there, they spread the teachings of Theosophy, and they popularized the impulse of this movement. And in 1882, they established the society's headquarters in the city of Madras, in Adyar. Back then it was called Madras, now it's called Chennai, when it has remained ever since. And so if it wasn't because of the existence of this theosophical movement, many of us wouldn't be here gathered this evening, and perhaps we have never come into contact with ideas as old as the world itself that we call today the ageless wisdom. No ancient anymore, but we have chosen to call them ageless because they are truly ageless, perennial. They don't die. They have such a living force. They are always fresh and new. Every time we go into them, there is new insights, new ways of looking at them, new angles to approach them, new ways of experiencing them. And so what a pertinent name to call them ageless. And of course wisdom for what it is. So the part that pertains to the motto of the Theosophical Society is that in 1880, nearly 138 years ago, Madame Blavatsky and Olcott traveled to northern India to visit Mr. and Mrs. Sinnett in Allahabad. And so they tour around different places. And Colonel Olcott, he was the driving force and the spokesword at that time. And he gave lectures in different areas. So in one occasion, their adventures took him to the palace of the Maharaj of Benares. Today is called Varanasi. It's the city of Varanasi, which is a city located at the banks of the Ganga River, the Ganges River. And, that is a very special city. They call it the spiritual capital of India. So it had that powerful force and conducive environment for them to find something wonderful, and they sure did. So they met with the Maharaj of Benares, and so they decided that the family motto of this family, that was Satyam na asti paradharmaha, a most noble statement, would be very suitable for the Theosophical Society. Now, Blavatsky knew more than a thing of two things, of Hinduism and the scriptures of the ancient Indian world. And so she knew that this was not a deliberate statement chosen by someone who really wanted to presume about, any particular family values. This was something that was chosen consciously. And so she said that this is something that she would like the society to live up to. And so she proposed this to the Maharaj of Benares, and sure enough, he consented to their petition, to their request, and it has remained this Theosophical Society's motto up to this day. And so well chosen for their times and for our times. So let us explore a little bit the meaning of these Sanskrit terms or statement. So Satyam Nasti Paradharmaha is a fragment of a passage from the 12th book of the great Hindu epic, the Mahabharata. So it was written in the 10th century BC approximately. It is said that it's one of the greatest epics ever written, has so many rich teachings and mythologies in there. And so the chapter that is taken, it is called Shanti Parvan. And so this particular chapter has to do with the exploration of the responsibilities set forth by the code of Dharma, the law of our great, our best being. And so this is basically a dialogue in between Yudhishthira, who was the eldest and most righteous of the 5 Pandavas. If you remember the Bhagavad Gita, you had these 5 Pandavas against these other 100 cousins, right? The Kauravas. So this righteous warrior and his uncle, his great uncle, his name was Bhishma Pitama, and it was towards the end of the battle when the Pandavas had won the war, and this uncle, this great uncle, was laid dying in a bed of arrows that had been shot at him. He had the power of immortality almost, but there was only one way that he could be killed. The mythology goes on and on, but I'm just going to leave it at that. And so just imagine this righteous man who was the embodiment of Dharma, of a true disciple, of a warrior, seeker of truth, in the presence of this incarnation of Dharma himself, who was his great uncle. Bhishma Pitama means he who is established in firm vows as well. He had made this vow of brahmacharya when he was younger, and he lived his life firmly established in his purity of life. There is much more to the mythology, but just to paint you a little picture of the contrast in between these 2 characters in the story. And so the dialogue was in between, of course, rationalness. How can I rule now this kingdom in a humble way? What are the ways of conduct of a noble king? What are the things that I should do not to lose my dignity, to rule as a humble man, not as a, selfish king or governor, or any of those things that people, their ego blow up and would like to just do automatically. They don't even think twice about it. And so the dialogue went on, and he asked, he said, tell me, in between falsehood and truthfulness, how can I distinguish in between all these things? And so right before this uncle, great uncle dies, he says, to tell you the truth is consistent with righteousness. There is nothing higher than truth. This is where the statement comes about. This is very intimate dialogue between these important characters in this great epic, and hence Satya Nasti Paradharma. And so the motto is an English translation of this term, this Sanskrit phrase, and there are different ways you can translate it, but as we know it, it translates as there is nothing greater than truth, or there is nothing higher, there's not a higher virtue than truth. That's another interpretation of it. But the first 3 words can be literally translated as Satyam, than truth. Na asti is not. And paro, further and or greater. Now the word dharma is a little bit more difficult to translate because it means so many things from different traditions. The Buddhists look at it a little bit differently. So its root meaning is that which is established or firm, hence law. Back to the mythology of the Mahabharata. This is why these characters in the story had these specific names, because they were also the embodiments of this eternal law. So from this basic root radiates other meanings, such as the eternal quality or character of the cosmos or of one's own nature. Duty, that's probably one of the most known translations for dharma. My duty, my responsibility here now, that I need to unfold, can be translated as morality, justice, religion, teachings or doctrines from the Buddhist tradition. I think this is what is most understood as the doctrines of the Buddha, you know, his Dharma. And, you know, but the motto in general, it is not really specifically about what we think of as religion. You know, it is not emphasizing the word religion in the way we merely understand it. Instead, it firmly states that none of our theories, personal values, experiences can measure up to the reality of what the ultimate truth really is. So no matter how coherent our theories and ideas are, the cultivation of an ever-increasing, flexible, open mind is a necessity for spiritual growth and for acquiring a deeper understanding. So that is really a basic imperative, if you will, necessity of every theosophist. Put it that way. You know, we theosophists that have determined, make that inner determination to know ourselves and to discover truth for ourselves. And so this is why we interpret it this way. So people who encounter this motto for the first time can be very puzzled by it, because the word religion stands out so loudly. You say, religion and truth, what do we mean by truth? What do we mean by religion? But yet it's so catchy that people have driven into the Theosophical movement, have embodied these teachings, have taught it throughout, and keep on rolling this movement ever since. And so the essence of our Theosophical worldview can be boiled down to, you know, two fundamental statements. We call them propositions because these are things that we propose and we suggest to the world to be considered. Even though for us sounds very truthful and very real, still something to be considered as a truth, as a truth. So the first statement, and this is taken from the Theosophical worldview, little handout that I gave you. I brought it from Olcott, that is given there to those who walk in, and says, the universe and all that exists within it are one interrelated and interdependent whole. Every existent being, from atom to galaxy, is rooted in the same universal life-creating reality. So this sweeping statement has the source and cause of all, that the source and cause of all manifested existence is but one absolute reality, is what many students of Theosophy throughout the ages have held as a truth most high. We can call it the truth most high, but I don't want to dare to say that because, like I say, we have to take that truth, even so it sounds so profound, we should take it lightly. And so, I think that when we experience this inner reality deep down in our being, is really life-altering. It is probably one of the most profound experiences anyone can ever have, when we really encounter truth face to face and we realize that life is nothing but one. That is really changing. It's a changing experience. It transforms us from inside out when it's genuinely experienced. So there's a huge difference, however, in between knowing something intellectually and knowing it as a lived experience. We as Theosophists, many of us have lived behind books, reading and indulging and pleasuring ourselves with this great source of knowledge that have been there written for us. But the question I ask myself, how many of all this content I have been able to assimilate and to put into practice or realize on my own? There are two different things. So a question that came to my mind is, how do I know that the experience, or any experience in general, which to me seems to be very meaningful, was indeed a genuine encounter with truth. How can we verify that? You know, what is the control of error that can tell us, oh, that might be something fleeting, that might be something that really meaningless, let's don't put too much thought into it. So what gives us that, you know, that little, what do you call it?
Kernel?
Yeah, kernel to like a like guidepost for living. You know, what gives us that little guidance? What is that little flashlight that can tell you, that can guide us to truth in this, you know, so-called day-to-day experiences? So every once in a while we do experience things. You know, we experience every once in a while something of the extraordinary. That is the truth. And those things, we can call them insights, right? We have insights into things. But insight really means, or really suggests, a whole transformation of our daily life. That's what the true word insight means. So insight implies that the way we live as a whole, based on a particular truth that we have realized has mutated, if you will, has changed, you know, has given us new vision based on this truth that we have realized. And so from that perspective, insight will mean something even deeper, right? So speaking on this subject, Joy Mills, beloved to all of us, tells us thus: any experience which broadens rather than narrows, which expands rather than contracts our sensitivity to life and our concerns for the welfare of others and of all that lives, must be one that at least approximates to truth. When the mind and the heart are one and completely open to what is, then truth speaks to us. For we have come into perfect accord with the true nature of things. To come into true perfect accord, there must be a cleansing of the heart and a clearing of the mind, so that we may feel and see and know the one ultimate reality in the midst of the many, forgetting self in the wonder and the miracle and the magnificence of the universal self. I'm going to read that again. So to come into contact with such a perfect accord, there must be a cleansing of the heart and a clearing of the mind, so that we may feel and may see and know the one ultimate reality in the midst of the many, forgetting self in the wonders and the miracle and the magnificence of the one universal self. She had a way of saying things so gloriously. So obviously when we talk about cleansing and clearing, that implies a self-transformation process within ourselves. Obviously, is the kind of life the Theosophical Society encourages us to engage in after, you know, a number of years of reading and exploration. There comes the next step to really do something with it, and that leads to self-unfoldment, self-transformation, self-realization, ultimately speaking. So this process, according to the Theosophical teachings, is an approach to the inner changes necessary not only for solving personal and social problems in the world and in our lives. You know, its ultimate goal has to do with bringing about a genuine spiritual growth and maturity of soul. This is why these spiritual practices are there for. It is for our souls to get to the next level, to mature, to evolve to the next step in their evolution. So this process is not a new thing at all. For most theosophists, you know, we do know that this is found in all age-old wisdom traditions from all over the world, from ancient to modern times. And so, I am not sure how many of you are familiar with Vicente Hao-Shin, who was the previous president of the Theosophical Society in the Philippines, a remarkable brother. He had the time and insight of putting together a somewhat systematic method of self-transformation, guidelines for self-transformation, if you put it that way, if I may put it that way. So he begins this process. Someone is arriving. So there are different aspects to this process. He doesn't jump into the purification of the personalities right away. He lays it out very clearly and very universally this way. The first step of this self-transformation consists on reviewing our personal map of reality. So he goes from the general to the more specific. The second one has to do with the clarification of our values through working with our conditionings. And the third aspect has to do with self-mastery of self or self-knowledge. You know, this is where the process of purification and self-development comes about. And ultimately, you know, this leads to transcendence, you know, going beyond the known into the unknown and to the plane of self-realization. So the second aspect, clarification of our values, is a threefold aspect. And so he says that there are universal and core values to take into consideration, which are unchanging. You know, that which is universal, which is of true intrinsic value for the human soul, will be true for the Hindu, as well as for the Muslim, as well as for the Christian, as well as for the atheist, because these are spiritual, moral qualities of the soul and spirit that are beyond language, that are universally expressed through the heart of humanity, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. They will not change. They will always be there. They are changeless, just as the ageless wisdom is. The heart has concealed these powers, these spiritual powers within, and are universal. So we have the part that has to do with social and cultural values, and these are changeable. You know, from time to time, these cultural values evolve, and you know, they become more, I would say, understandable and more humane, you know, more compassionate, if you will. And things that seem to be so outrageous 40 years ago, today is something but of a trivial nature. Oh, that is really nothing. And you would, you know, back then you would get in a big trouble if you did some things. And so, you know, put it this way, truth seems to be a dynamic movement. You know, it is not something that you can color code black and white. So you have things that are fixed, things that change every once in a while, and things that are constantly fleeting, that are constantly conditioning themselves and colored by our own filters. And so one could speak of relative truths in these terms. One could speak of absolute truth, and we can also speak of hypothesis. And you know, at this point I should say that we should hold our own truths very lightly. Even this theosophy that you and I are talking about with so much enthusiasm, that seems so familiar to us, so rich and so valuable and so profound and absolute even for some of us, is but a shadow, a small fragment of the eternal wisdom of life. HPV suggests that all theosophical writings, as enlightening as they may sound, should be taken as hypotheses, offered to the consideration of the thinking portion of our minds. That is a powerful statement right there, her saying that, coming from her. Now let's explore that a little bit, because anything as spiritual, esoteric, if you will, if you want to call it that has been left in writing cannot be esoteric anymore, cannot be called inner anymore. Because if you don't want it to be known, don't leave it in writing. That is going to come to the light at some point. And there is a beauty to that when it is appropriate, right? You share it with the world. Thanks to that, we have these beautiful ancient scriptures that we can now enjoy. The translation in so many languages. These teachings, she's gone, and we are still delighting ourselves by all the things that she was able to be in touch with and pass down to us. But what we don't have is the understanding to assimilate these teachings, and let alone to embody it in our daily lives. And so they are taken as hypotheses because these are things for us to ponder. And when we ponder and when we think about these things, is only when we stimulate that thinking mind, which thought, thinking, the thinking process, it is something necessary, because we need the mind. It is a vehicle. We need a mind that thinks clearly, that thinks properly, that knows how to think. And so these concepts, these theosophical ideas, these theosophical approaches to life are something that truly stimulate us from within. It's not something that really invites us to indulge more and more and more into the world, but that takes us more and more and more within ourselves, and to start a new life within, to awaken to a different, wider, richer reality within ourselves, a path of return. And so in one of her articles, back in the 1888 from the Lucifer magazine, an article titled, pertinent to our topic, "What is Truth?" HPV, beautiful state. She beautifully lays out this topic. I wish I could share with you the whole article. I should have printed it out because it's rather short, but it is so inspiring. So she says, talking about truth, truth is a multi-faced jewel, the facets of which it is impossible to perceive all at once. And since no two men, however ancient, to discern truth, can see even one of those facets alike, what can we do, or what can be done to help them to perceive it? So she asked herself, what can be done to help them to perceive it? Because there are not two human beings who see the same thing alike. Even the same sun that is setting, my inner experience is going to be totally different. My inner picture will be totally different. And likewise with any of our realities. So she further states that each of us can relatively reach the sun of truth, even on this earth, and assimilate its warmest and most direct rays, however differentiated they may become after the long journey through the physical particles in space. Of course, you can tell that she said that. Now, to achieve this, there are two methods. On the physical plane, we may use our mental polaridoscope. She makes this word, I know whether it's a true word or not, but I'm reading what she wrote. I'm going to spell it for you. Polariscope. How do you read that? Polaridoscope. And analyzing the properties of each ray, so that from that we will choose the purest of all. On the plane of spirituality, to reach the Sun of Truth, we must work in that earnest to the development of our highest spiritual nature, of our higher nature. So he states it clearly that we have to work at the physical plane and at the spiritual plane alike. So one is implying that there is an effort of the mind to discern, and the other one to transform. The two together makes a perfect accord to get the work done. But it is not as simple as that. So it gets a little bit more complex. So there are certain conditions to awaken to this realization of truth. And I call them conditions because he names them conditions, but we could also call them attitudes or moods of the soul for this awakening, because we have to put ourselves in a place with a feeling, with a yearning, with a wanting to know, with an earnestness to know, and that doesn't come only through thought, but is a mood, is a space that we create for ourselves to receive that gift, that grace, if you will, from the divine, from life itself. So we have to be open to receive it. It will come to us only if I open the window and let the light come in, or move the curtains and clear the way and have a room clear, organized, tidy, simply, so that that can penetrate and illumine the whole space. And so first of all, we have that one of these conditions, maybe it sounds so simplistic to you, but it has been the condition universally spoken throughout all the mystery schools. And I have crisscrossed, I have compared different teachings from different philosophers and figures within the Theosophical movement and outside of the Theosophical movement, and it seems to be, these statements seem to be quite universal, and this is why I want to share them with you, because everyone has come up to the same conclusion, and I say, well, there might be something of value there, so I'm just going to share with you as well. And so the first one has to do with reverence or devotion to truth and knowledge. So how can we bring devotion into our thought life? Bring devotion. We can bring devotion to a God out there. We go to a temple. We have devotion for the gurus, for the teachers. But how can we really have devotion for knowledge itself, for truth itself, that ultimately speaking, that is what prevails? My Hindu teacher always says, these teachings are not mine. They were passed down to me, and I am humbly privileged to share them with you today. Don't waste them. Do something with them. And it's such a gift to have them and not let them die. The more we practice them, the more we share them with others. We are imbuing them with new energy. They will not change, but they will vibrate even stronger, and we'll keep them alive that way. And so if we think about it, for us today, it is so easy to press a button in the computer and know and inquire about anything. Everything is written, everything is given to us, and much more than we are able to even assimilate in 3 lifetimes. And back then, in the ages of Pythagoras, or any of these Neoplatonic later on, These people sacrificed their lives for knowledge. They were burning the stake. They traveled the world in ships, barefooted, seeking for these mysteries, seeking for this knowledge that was truly hidden from the, what would you call it? From the profane. They didn't want these precious jewels of wisdom to be spoiled and to be contaminated by the selfish minds of our times. It's always been the case that we use them for our own personal benefits. And so, how can we activate this inner life and really feel reverence for this knowledge that has come throughout these ages and that we have them here before us so easily, so effortlessly for us, written down here before us in this tiny little book. I will go back to it later. At the feet of the Master, how small of a jewel. In it, there is a map of the spiritual life in such a simple language. Nothing different what was written in the ancient mystery schools of Egypt or India or Greece. It's no difference. We have it here today, so small, fits in your pocket. You can carry it with you. You can read it in the train station and no one can judge you. Oh, at the feet of the Master. What does that? Oh, sure. In the olden times, that probably must have been written in numbers, all decoded there for you to, would not talk about these things. But anyway, just to really acknowledge and to really pay reverence to the effort that has been put into bringing about, especially this movement of Theosophy, that I think it should be one of its objects, the preservation of this ancient wisdom. We are the repository of this perennial wisdom and should be preserved for the generations to come. We don't look at it as an object, but it's really intrinsically one of our missions to do that. So, the Theosophic life, as many of us have heard, has these three aspects. And this is a kind of life that really we don't learn from any particular guru or any particular teacher or religion that tells us this is what you need to do. But this is a realization that we have come on our own. It is a self-inspired and self-initiated way of living, if you will, that implies the whole of our being without disregarding any aspects of our life in this earnest seeking for spirituality, for truth, for knowledge, and of course, ultimately speaking, to serve humanity and the rest of existence. And so we will know that this life stands upon three pillars of equal measurement. And we call them study, we call them meditation, and we call this selfless service to all fellow beings. So it's not just humanity, but to all creatures that live upon this universe, visible and invisible. So this threefold self-discipline ultimately awakens in us some genuine, very genuine universal values or virtues, if you want to call them virtues, which are love, compassion, and understanding. These words have been so overused that when you say love, it is so ordinary. Has become such an ordinary little term. It's so easy to use. It's so, in the Islamic tradition, I think that there are, I don't know how many words to describe love. There are so many.
I think there are 99. virtues.
Yes, I don't know the exact number, but just to say
virtues.
that there are more than one to say the exact same thing. They are all profoundly enriching to the soul as well, these virtues. So compassion is another, and let alone understanding. Understanding is not something that I just understand. True understanding, we cannot understand something that doesn't have meaning. And for that thing to have meaning, has to be ensouled with something of the extraordinary and of the divine for us to understand, for us to decipher, for us to unveil. And pretty much everything has an inner life. Everything is alive, as we know, but the world has become very ordinary. The material things have become very ordinary because we have so many of that, as opposed to that what we really, really need. And that what we really, really need, I need very little, and that becomes very special. So we take our lives for granted, and all the gifts that we have to enjoy and that serves us. And so those are the three pillars that we willingly take upon our own discipline, and if we practice these things, this is where it leads us. It leads us to this realization. And so, this, as I say, this threefold discipline or inner discipline awakens our true spiritual nature. And so it is only through the clear gaze of the spirit that truth can be experienced and realized in the depths of our own being. We can only look through the eye of the spirit in order to realize that which is everlasting, which is clearly true, eternal. So the second condition or attitude of soul, if you will, had to do with a profound and earnest interest in finding this truth. Obviously have to be an inner motivation. No one can propel you forth to discover it, because then you will not have the understanding. Not you, but us, me. I will not have that genuine transformation that would take me forward to take that step, right? And so it is something that we inwardly want and need to desire fervently, eagerly, that I will not eat or drink or sleep or live, if you let me, until I find it, and I will. Such a determination, totally pledged to this discovery of truth. How many of us do really have that drive? Do I have it? Do you have it? It seems that there is something that has brought us together to the Theosophical Society that we build from previous lifetimes that have brought us back together and continue this journey, and repledge ourselves over and over to this search for truth. So that's something that we shouldn't take for granted. It is something very sacred, and we have earned that. And I think we should really live up to that. And so, truth cannot be discovered by a mind which has fixations, prejudices and biases of any kind. This implies that we should not have a prejudgment of anything or a conviction that one knows already everything, or at least something. The moment we say, I know, the moment we just don't know. it is really counteractive. It just loses its value. And so at last we have a third attitude, and that has to do with the creation or providing for ourselves some moments of inner quiet and inner peace that allows us to develop this undisturbed equanimity in order for us to be able to consider what is true, what is of true value. Many factors cause the mind to lose its serenity and keep it in a state of agitation. We all know that very well. All the passions which agitate the mind, jealousy, envy, hatred, or fear, most of all fear, distort the ability of the mind to see facts as they really are. HPB has a wonderful way to say this. She says that selfishness is the impassable, another one of his wonderful words, thank God I can pronounce this one, is the impassable wall between the personal self and truth. It's almost like an impenetrable wall in between personal self and truth. What a way to say that, huh? Selfishness is the impassable wall between the personal self and truth. That is also taken from that article that I said, what is truth? I will probably send you an email with that, and you can print it out and read it for a study one day. It's short, but it's so wonderful. So yes, in other words, we have again this necessity to practice our discernment, our discrimination. If we don't discriminate, if we don't have that capacity turned on all the time, there is a high likelihood that we will deceive ourselves, at every step of the way. And, as the golden stairs that we started our meeting with today, an unveiled spiritual perception. That is like the one goal, the one side eye that is our vision, that is our target, an unveiled spiritual perception. And without that, without the developing of that, obviously intuition would not unfold. So first discrimination has to awaken and refine itself in such a manner that we get to the point in our lives that when we see it. And there is no need to hesitate in between right and wrong, because we see it. And once you see it, you transform your life, and it is what it is, right? And so I brought the little book At the Feet of the Master, even though it's such simple reading and simple way of speaking about these truths. The first qualification on this path of discipleship, and by the way, discipleship is a word that has been used and has really gained a lot of meaning, but the true word of discipleship is being a student of life, being an earnest student of life. It's not following a particular guru. This discipline, discipleship, is what it truly means. This is what these teachings lead. Of course, we do believe in the presence of the masters and all their teachings and their guides and help for humanity, but it boils down to this self-responsibility. And so these qualifications, starting from and ending from discrimination. The second one is desirelessness, good conduct, and love. But on discrimination, he has something to say. He says that the third of these qualifications is discrimination, and this is usually taken as a discrimination between the real and the unreal, which leads men to enter the path. It is this, but it is also much more, and it is to be practiced not only at the beginning of the path, but at every step of the way, but at every step of it, every day until the end, until the very end of the journey. And so you wonder why it is so important, because even at the very end, even initiates, great initiates, have fallen from their heights. There's always tests along the way that can, that can really measure our level of understanding and our level, the maturity of our understanding and our spiritual growth. And so I think that we've talked quite a lot by now. I think that it will be a good time to bring it all together. And all I can say is that the discovery of truth from this theosophical perspective, it takes place in the midst of that vital and dynamic process that we call our own lives. It is not outside of it. We don't have to go to the caves. We don't have to go to India to visit any remarkable holy place. It is in the midst of our own daily lives where the battlefield takes place. So we are encouraged to purify our minds and our hearts and to develop the will to dare, to inquire, to think deeply, independently, creatively, clearly, freely, without prejudice. For truth is not away from life. It reveals itself in the very movement of our daily living. And so what would be the world like if it had it as its motto, there is no religion higher than truth? If every individual who acknowledges the theosophical ideals of universal brotherhood really lived in accordance to this truth, what would be the world like? Something profound to think about. So maybe we can explore that together. And with that, I think that I would just leave it up to you now. Enough of me for now. So thank you for listening, and I'm sure that you've shared with me something that is of value to you as well. I can see it in your faces, otherwise you have not come here today. So I deeply appreciate your time and invitation for being here today.
It's wonderful.
Yes.
We always say, remember when we used to clap, and we used to clap like this?
Oh, yes. Yes, I always say, please don't clap. Just let that thought form, gather strength now, make it yours. And I am happy to sit down in a chair now. And really, I don't have any podium here, so I just have to, come and sit down. And, there are many things that we talked about. And like I said again, these conditions are nothing but a mood. I like to look at it that way. When I look at it that way, I don't get caught up in so-called discipline. These words have become so archaic that our etheric body sort of like becomes rigid. I don't want to fall into that trap again. You know what I mean? And so we want something enlivening. We want something that we can make our own, and that we can be creative and experience with it within the boundaries of safety, right? I mean, you can go so creative that then you are into dangerous arenas. And so that's why, the theosophical teachings have always been like this double-edged knife or weapon. Now, I don't want to talk about weapons, but sometimes it's like that. It's like a child playing with a very sharp knife, and you don't know this child what it's going to do with this sharp knife. Well, I have 3 years old in my classroom chopping vegetables with real knives, very sharp. But the first times that they learn how to use it, they do bleed and they get cut. They do cut, and they say, "Ooh, this is real. It is a real knife. I better use it well. What a responsibility." And that same gesture is the feeling that we feel when we encounter these powerful truths to live up to.
To me, it sounds like you're saying it's a state of mind, and I'm struck with how your description is one of the best I've ever heard anyone describe the idea of the theosophical life or a theosophical principle, and you made it very accessible. and that idea of being ready to receive.
Let me share something with you since you are touching that topic. When I gave this lecture, I drew a little diagram, and I find it even more practical if you look at it that way. You know, you will not be able to see it right here, but I made these 3 dotted triangles, which is, you know, the symbol of the white brotherhood, but it means the Trinity of men, right? So I put down below here the word meditation, study, and service. Selfless service, not just service, but selfless service. So this is a dynamic process, you know. As we all know in nature, there is no such a thing as duality, but a triplicity, where the moment you have the second aspect, the third one is the one that completes it. So you always have this trinity in nature. We shouldn't look at it as a dual world. It is a threefold living universe. And so this is also a threefold, if you will, living dynamic practice that we can have. And so there are things that we do gain from it if we decide to give it a try. I mean, it's not something that I say, oh, tomorrow I'm just going to do this, or tomorrow I'm just going to do that, because tomorrow I think I can meditate, but then next month I'm just going to do service. It is so dynamic that one cannot happen without the other. If you do too much meditation and very little study and very little selfless service, what can become very self-centered? Meditation that way can bring us to isolation, and certainly is not going to develop the quality of heart, the quality of love that our hearts need to reach out to the other, you know, and be interested in the other, right? And serve the world. And so the qualities that we gain from study is this understanding, because the mind doesn't want to accumulate, but wants to understand. And this is the capacity, this discernment capacity is what is going to endure when we go from life to life. It's not the content of the mind that prevails and that endures. It's the capacity that we have practiced and acquired and mastered in the previous lifetime that is archived there in our causal body from life to life. And so the content, you know, keep it empty, right, so that capacities are fresh and young, vital, as opposed to a dull mind that is, you know, what do you call it when something gets full of water that is just so heavy and dump, you know, it's like a dump, but by this heaviness of dead knowledge. It is all dead knowledge unless you enliven it with experience and with new ways of looking at it. And so the third aspect really brings us to compassion, because we give ourselves to the world, right? We go beyond ourselves. But then we are developing these qualities, the heart, we are developing the mind, and we are developing our spiritual will. Action has to do with our will. And paradoxically, we do it in the physical world. Whereas the mind and the heart is something very subtle within, the spiritual will, it reflects in the physical world and is our Atma, our highest, most spiritual aspect of our lives. And we looked at it from that perspective, say, well, it does make sense. These 3 words are very simple, but if I see what it does on me, I will consider it. And maybe do a little bit of the 3 of them without disregarding the study. It's not study just from the books. Self-study, self-reflection. Krishnamurti used to say that there is not a greater book ever written than the book of our own lives. If we sit with our own lives, our own biographies are the best legacy we can give to humanity. And that is a unique book that only you and I are writing, right? page by page, second by second, and it is archived.
Mm-hmm.
It is archived in time and space. And so, you know, these three aspects I really cherish, because it has really brought me to a simpler way of living, you know, to a life of you know, more gratitude for everything that I have, for the knowledge that I have been able to encounter and explore with others. So it really softens you within. It makes you so tenderly open and grateful. And when you look at what the Theosophical Society truly is and stands for, aren't we privileged? And people say, why do you keep around the Theosophical Society? Don't you have other things to do? I say, yeah. I will keep around because there is something of intrinsic value in it.
Those three principles are so succinct, and as I'm hearing them, I'm reflecting on the three principles of Buddhism: body, mind, and speech. And they're not necessarily so obvious, because the mind is where the heart is the seat of the heart. And I mean, there's a complexity there that's very interesting, that kind of, and service is you know, bodhicitta, and is a big part in study and right action, and then meditation. So it really has a beautiful parallel with that tradition. And what you said about having enthusiasm and then this gratitude, those are also very high values in Buddhism, and in any path. And what you said about, like, the modern world, you know, the postmodern world, you know, we can push a button. I remember being a young adult, 20 years old, wanting to find things. And it took me 30 years to get to the Theosophical Society and to learn some of these ideas. And at the same time, there are kids who are 15 who can push a button and get all that now.
In a second.
So hopefully they'll go further.
You know,
too.
My dear Stephen and I were talking as we were driving over here, and said, well, I mean, you have all this myriad of information, but one thing that button can bestow upon your head is the understanding. Right. You can read thousands of pages, but how much of it we are able to assimilate, as I began the lecture, yeah, I won't call it a lecture, it's called a sharing. How much of it are we able to live? How much of it have we experienced already? You know, because some things we read and say, and I was not able to put it into words, and this is exactly what I meant. This is exactly what I got out of that. Haven't you have those insights, you know? And oh my gosh, every time I feel that and say, yes, I am not alone in this world. Someone has experienced the same thing, and it's wonderful.
Right, the confirmation,
you know what I mean?
Yes.
It might not be the same, because there are not two experiences alike, but you know, there are seekers of truth throughout the world that are forming this nucleus that we reach out, if we will, with our minds, with our hearts. And that sense of loneliness is there no more. We are always guided and accompanied by these like-minded souls. They are everywhere. They're everywhere.
I know I had an experience meeting through email a Theosophical group in Cardiff, Wales. And just the tone of their conversation, I started corresponding.
Isn't that wonderful?
Yes, that sense of community and shared values.
That's right. Yeah. So, I'm sorry, what is your name again?
Maki Linda.
Maki Linda, nice to
Nice to
meet you.
meet you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming.
I hadn't been here for a while, and
It's all right.
I had the school as my landmark, but the school building is so dark at night. And there's one little tiny sign, and
And there's one road to get here.
and you just really
You have to take that one
easily pass.
We're
it.
kind of hidden, right?
Yeah.
So hopefully it'll be easier next time I can.
Yeah, you've no idea how much I appreciate this memory you know, this is triggering some memory, I won't say from my childhood, but from my youth, you know. It is taking me back home. It is really incredible what I'm feeling right now. It's just like, oh my gosh, this is how it began, and this is how it continues. There are still places, there's still this little nucleus that carry the work. You know, we have the headquarters, I was telling Kathleen, you have this, you know, huge places, and Kathleen was saying, well, I wish I could live there, you know, and do the work. But this is the work that needs to be done. This is the heart that beats and vibrates throughout this whole entire neighborhood. This is a rippling effect. In fact, in these more, you know, problematic towns that we have to have these centers, not a huge building, but a center, a person who lives this life that can be the light of the community. And you don't have to say anything, don't tell anybody.
Thank you.
And
wherever you go.
We don't realize what impact we have in the city until you have these little experiences where one time years back when we used to have these book sales, and I had put a sign in this window here in the library that said book sale, and we had I had two young men come knocking at the door. I was living here at the time,
Right.
and they wondered, are you moving? Are you leaving the city? No, they'd never been here.
Right.
But they knew about us. So we have a presence in the city, whether they're individuals coming here or not.
How about
They
that?
didn't want us to leave.
Yeah.
So
Live.
we've been here 110 years now.
110 years.
But not in this house.
Actually, I'm sorry, 1910
Yeah.
to 20, longer than that, right?
And right here.
Right.
Well,
no,
this-
in the city.
In the
In the
city.
city. We've
Yes.
been here since 85.
Oh,
They
okay.
purchased this house in 1985.
Oh, okay.
They had been renting, going from one place to the other.
Yes.
And
They
Annie
decided-
Besant actually came here to, not this building, but to this lodge.
She
Yeah.
signed the she signed
The
a
charter.
charter, yeah.
Amazing, amazing.
And I want to really thank you for what you just said, though, because it's personally giving me a deeper sense of, you know, what we're doing here, and that it means something, and it's opening me to a new view, and that's what I was saying. I've never heard anyone give such a great description of what that is, what Theosophy is.
Thank you. But see, this is the thing, you know, we have these places, and a person who wants to share or who comes to share from, you know, from Olcott or whatever, comes and, you know, and stimulates the center and, you know, brings new views or ideas and all that. But when the person leaves, how many come? When the person leaves, who are the ones that carry on the work? And so what we really have to think about is that every person that comes, no matter who is speaking, no matter what is the study, is coming to contribute and to give. I keep saying this over and over, and I'm going to die and I'm going to keep saying the exact same thing over and over and over again, because if our attitude is always to come to learn and to take something from it, well, what can I take from that lecture today? What can I take from my visit today? I want to go there because I need tranquility, and I need this, and I need that book and all that. And I always say, is what you bring, your uniqueness and the gift that you have to bring to that place, your vitality, your energy, your experience, that is going to make the group stronger, and that is going to make more impact in the world. And so one person cannot do it. Who cares about the one person? I'm going to go home and go to sleep, and I forgot about all the things I need to think about my kids tomorrow. You know, the sharing, that doesn't belong to me. I was able to put it all together right there, right? I go home and I tell your sister, I will forget it because I have things to do tomorrow. What are you going to do next week? Are we coming here and keep it up? Not that topic, forget about that topic. You make it up. You bring something new, alive, or old, make it new. I always like the old books. I don't like the new literature. I like the old books, first editions,
Here.
without being edited. I don't like the footnotes or no. Give me the old. I want to smell it. I want to open it. I want those what do you call it? The corners that are all, what do you call it?
Dog-eared.
Yeah, the dog-eared and brittle. Give me that. I like that, And that has a tremendous value. In my lodge in Cuba, we don't have this variety of books. We have very, very old books, all yellow. You can hardly see.
So do we.
And they are jewels. They are jewels.
Yes.
And why do we need so many? There's only a handful of those good ones. Go back to those essential ones.
Right.
And just make your own book. Write it out. And yeah, keep it up. I say that there is a very special energy in this place. I feel it. And it reminds me of home, and now you are saying it. Our lodge in Cuba started, I think, is 1903. It's the oldest one in Latin America, and Annie Besant signed the charter. Her and Olcott. And so has that same feeling of home.
That could be it, right.
I don't know whether it's true or not, but this is what I am feeling, and don't quote me on that, but there must be something of
That is
her
a
spirit.
common comment that many people have said, besides yourself, who have come here. That
Wow.
there is a special energy they feel in this place, right?
Yeah.
So,
I think it was the Sufis that refer to it as remembrance
Yes.
and coming together
Yeah.
and remembering our essential selves, as a group. The energy
Yeah.
is shared and expanded upon when people come together, and the zikr that the Sufis have is called remembrance.
Remembrance.
Who we really are.
Yes.
And we, like in Buddhism, you can't do that without through jewels. You have to have the community.
Right.
You have to have the teachings, the wisdom teachings, and we have
Buddhas.
and we have these examples, of people that have achieved of the greater, enlightenment.
But see,
But we don't need. I think this age is very unique.
yes.
In that we no longer need a clergy to interpret spiritual writings.
Right.
We don't even necessarily have to have the presence. It's a great blessing, to be in the presence of a great teacher
Right.
and a fully enlightened master. But we can't always achieve that in our lifetimes. If we're very, very blessed, we might. But there's a unique aspect, I think, to this age, to this last 150 years, when as the planet has come closer together and as
Right.
we've had things that can facilitate knowledge, so exponentially than in times past. So I think that's the exciting part of individual investigation of truth.
Definitely.
In
This is definitely the age of the consciousness soul, as some anthroposophists call it. This is the age of the individuality, and ultimately speaking, the true teacher is our spiritual intuition.
right.
There's nothing but that.
That's right.
and all the traditions say
the
that.
spiritual
basically.
aspect that is teaching through that guru is the teachings alive through that lens that he's looking through, and he's able to articulate it and pass it on. But he has the capacity, the vision, the connection with that. But the teachings and the truths, the spiritual knowledge itself doesn't belong to anybody.
We all have
It is
access.
a living being in the universe, in the world, is there, stored for us to receive it, to experience it, to share it with others. And this is why we have to be so humble, because the only thing that is ours is the capacity to speak and articulate it and to access to it through our experiences. But the rest of it is really, when it comes to these truths, it doesn't belong to us, to anybody.
Right. Right.
I have this
So
saying
hopefully
that I say, and I guess I don't own it, but thoughts think people. That idea that
People.
that the consciousness, the knowledge is there, and as we're able to let it penetrate us.
We're the manifestation of it.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so it's like a reversal of the I. You know, it's
Yeah.
dispensing with that.
Do you have something to say, Stephen?
No, thank you.
Just listening.
Thank you for keeping it going.
Yes.
Thank you, Kathleen. She's the heart of the matter here.
She sure is.
She's had that camera on. She's the heart of the matter.
There you go.
Thank you all. Thank you. Tell me your names again. Jean, Jerry. I remember your name, Stephen.
Yes.
Right.
I'm assuming.
Sumi, yes.
Bucky?
Becky.
And Steph.
Stephanie.
Kathleen.
All right. Wonderful.
Well, thank you so much.
Hope to see you again sometime in the
Yes,
future.
It's been a pleasure. Let's finish off with Annie